Hi there, everyone. Happy Friday. It's 4 o'clock in New York. A new chapter today in what is a test case for the Trump administration and its multi-front assault on activities long protected by our First Amendment. Journalist Don Lemon pleaded not guilty in court to 2 counts. They include conspiracy against right of religious freedom. He was charged after covering a
administration is all about. The process is the punishment with them. And like all of you here in Minnesota, the great people of Minnesota, I will not be intimidated. I will not back down. I will fight these baseless charges, and I will not.
Don Lemon faces, in effect, a civil rights case, and one so flimsy that many attorneys who used to work at the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division believe it will ultimately be dismissed. Legal experts telling CBS News this, quote, "The indictment against journalist Don Lemon and 8 others will likely be dismissed because it hinges on a charge that is viewed as so constitutionally flawed that the Justice Department Civil Rights Division has never attempted to use it to prosecute interference in a house of worship. That novel theory of the law comes on top of a set of alternative facts presented in the actual indictment by the Justice Department. On that, the Washington Post reports this, quote, "The January 29th indictment calls the 9 defendants agitators and says they, quote, entered the church in a coordinated takeover-style attack. In multiple instances, it describes the alleged conduct of the 2 journalists and the protesters collectively. Experts said that if Lemon was operating as a journalist during the January 8th protest at City's Church in St. Paul, rather than as a participant, that could undermine accusations that he was part of a conspiracy or that he intended to interfere with protected rights. During the approximately 45 minutes that Lemon live-streamed administration's war on the press is where we start today. President of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carasone, is here. Also joining us, Puck News senior political columnist, national affairs analyst John Heilman is back, and former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg is also back. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Angelo, I want to start with you, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I know your organization has been targeted. Don Lemon has long been someone who got under Donald Trump's skin. Donald Trump, at least, believes that he's part of the reason that Don Lemon is no longer at CNN. I'm not sure that's rooted in too much truth. Donald Trump's attacks against the press are legendary. They're incessant. And what is different, I suppose, is that in 2.0, he has the free rein to use the Justice Department to intimidate, threaten, cause journalists and media organizations to incur massive legal fees. And I just wonder if you can speak to this moment in this part of the Trump story, which is a little opaque to people not experiencing this.
Yeah, I mean, there's something you said during your intro really resonated. You know, obviously the process is the punishment, but there was another part that stuck out to me, which is that experts say that, you know, that the government is unlikely to succeed in these prosecutions. Sure. But it's still extraordinarily painful. Experts have been saying that about my situation for a couple of years now, and I'm still knee deep in it every day. And, you know, and I have confidence in those experts' assessments, but that doesn't change the calculus here. They are willing to do these extraordinary things because they recognize that the process itself is the punishment, and the intention is to stop, you know, opponents or those they view as opposition from doing that work, so that they then can get even they can even execute their plans and their intentions faster, stronger, longer, you know, be more effective. So that, I mean, it's a real thing, and you know, it has lots of reverberations and broader consequences. And underneath all of that is that they didn't just have an intention to go after journalists; they had a plan. They did have a plan, and that plan was everything from, you know, at a foundational level, changing over and breaking norms at the Department of Justice and getting rid of the people that would even try to uphold those norms, so that then you could start to do these kinds of things. You know, this prosecution effort is one step in their larger assaults against journalists, but they've done a whole bunch of other stuff too. They've made it easier to subpoena records, to get all kinds of investigations into journalists. They rescinded a whole bunch of rules and protections at the DOJ when it came to sniffing around what journalists were doing. All that's gone. And so the exposure is there, and the tools are there for them to use that exposure to then attack and go after opponents. And day in, day out, we see sort of people, you know, fold.
And as we know, Don Lemon needs to be the next to fall.
On top of that, I would throw in trespass, disorderly conduct, disturbing a religious meeting, which are normally state crimes. Look, Don Lemon could be prosecuted as a willing participant. He committed trespass. He appears, as you and I discussed last night, to have embedded himself in the mob.
If I were the federal prosecutor, I would charge, yes, the FACE Act. I would charge civil rights. I would charge conspiracy. I would charge obstruction of free exercise of religion. I would charge federal trespass, harassment, a whole host of things. And on the state level, child endangerment, too.
Michael Feinberg, those are pundits on TV, and we are all pundits on TV, so no hate at pundits. But never before has there been an administration that governs and takes their lead from pundits on TV. And so just to illustrate this pipelining of the smear, the seed, they know Donald Trump is always watching television, and they have a Justice Department now that operationalizes these political vendettas. Just talk about not how far from normal that is, but how dangerous that is for people that don't have access to all of the platforms that Don Lemon does.
It's incredibly dangerous simply because I don't know that the average citizen who's not enmeshed in this world realizes, but even if you win a case against the Justice Department, whether it's a civil trial or you're found not guilty in a criminal trial, it is an incredibly expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining process just to go through. And that's normally why, before an indictment or a lawsuit is ever brought in the first place, DOJ would normally have a whole system of differently ranked people who would need to approve the charging document or the complaint. But what we've seen happen over the past year is the overwhelming majority of those ranks have been either fired or quit in disgust. So the only ones left are the ones that tend to watch the pundits we just watched. And, you know, at the risk of getting glib, in any group or class of people or professions, there's going to be a bell curve of intelligence. And I'd humbly suggest that the pundits we just watched are probably at the left tail of that particular bell curve and not the ones that the Justice Department should be relying on for legal analysis.
Well, so where does it put the people at the Justice Department on that bell curve if they follow them?
I would simply note that for almost the entirety of the Justice Department's existence, it was incredibly rare for them to ever see an indictment get dismissed or to not be able to get a true bill out of a grand jury. And we are now seeing that occur regularly for the first time in our nation's 250-year history.
Yeah. John Heilman, Don Lemon was not the only journalist who was targeted by the Justice Department in this effort. I want to show you what Georgia Fort said on with my colleague Rachel Maddow about her experience of also being targeted and arrested by the Trump administration.
There's been a series of things that have happened, right? Like the Pentagon reporters who were not going to comply with the new policies that were put in place, Kimmel being pulled off air, the segment on 60 Minutes not running when it was supposed to, and probably only running because of the outcry from the public, right? And so there's been a strategic attack on the free press for quite some time, but recently it is intensifying, and I would say that the arrest of myself and Don Lemon is a new level to threaten taking someone's freedom away for them simply doing their job, to try and criminalize journalism. Journalism is not a crime. And for me, when I think about the attack that we're currently seeing on the press, I really want American people to understand attacking the press is not simply just attacking journalists. It's attacking the public's right to know.
I love where she ends that. It is, and I think that we all struggle with how and when to cover media stories because it can feel navel-gazy, right? It isn't about us, right? We are simply conduits, and there's so many choices. You could get all your information on Substack. Lots of people do, but attacking the journalists, especially independent journalists, is about attacking the public's access to real information and real facts. And that feels like the most important part of the story, Heilman.
Well, sure. And also, Nicolle, one of the most obviously blatantly authoritarian, autocratic impulses or tactics that we've seen. It's like, the attack on the public right to know, the attack on truth itself is essential to propping up dictatorial, authoritarian, autocratic regimes. I would say, a few quick things. There are a couple kind of categorical dichotomies I'd like to talk about. One of them is the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, something we talk about a lot on this show. Here's a really good example of it. Trump 1.0, Trump railed against the press all the time, attacked a variety of journalists, including Don Lemon, with great frequency, said things that really disturbed all of us when he said that the press were the enemy of the people, declared us to be that. But what happened in Trump 2.0, as you've been talking about here, the systematization and the weaponization in a much more formal way, where the 4 years that he was out of office, as in so many other areas, gave them time to plan and to strategize and to operationalize. That's one big difference. The second thing relates to Georgia Fort and Don Lemon, who are both clearly people with journalistic credibility and with resumes that run back into legacy media, now doing work in independent media. But it's an important distinction, right? Because it is what you hear from those pundits that you played, and what runs through a lot of this discourse is that everybody who's in independent media now is going to be attacked as being an activist. A lot of people in mainstream media are attacked as being activists, but part of what the legal reasoning here is that these aren't reporters. These are participants, these are activists, these are not really people who deserve the protections of the First Amendment. And then the third thing I'd say, and it's just a very simple thing, but in all of the things that we've seen in Trump 2.0, where Trump has gone after the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CBS News repeatedly, ABC News, it's always been with civil cases. He's sued people in order to intimidate them. This is all working towards the same end, which is to silence and control information. But he stayed on the civil side. Why has he stayed on the civil side? Because there's nobody who really disputes that the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CBS News, ABC News are traditionally seen as being part of the Fourth Estate. He has now moved into the criminal realm, right? These two arrests are not what Trump has done before, where he's just sued people for outrageous sums, made them go through the motions. The New York Times stood up to him and he backed down. The Wall Street Journal stood up to him. The ABC News and CBS News capitulated and wrote him checks. But all of those things were were played out in the civil arena. The big Rubicon that's being crossed here, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that these are independent journals without the kind of history or the kind of resources that those other big institutions I named. He's going after those people criminally. And I think that is what's so disconcerting about this, because you're not talking here about making people, money is a big deal. Time is a big deal. Hassle is a big deal in a civil court. But criminal stakes, even if the cases are blatantly ridiculous, the stakes are so high because they are about the individual freedom of the journalists who are working, and that takes this into a totally different place. And we should be all the more disconcerted than we already are about what's going on because of that Rubicon being crossed.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the story we led with yesterday, that Rubicon crossed in the failed effort to indict 6 lawmakers for exercising their First Amendment rights and simply telling men and women of the military not to follow illegal orders. I want to press all of you on what a year ago wouldn't have even felt like a statement that had to be made. Journalism isn't a crime. You could say peaceful protest isn't a crime. You could say following a judge's order isn't a crime. You could say following the military handbook isn't a crime. Donald Trump trying to criminalize all those things. We'll talk about that on the other side. Also ahead for us, another round of accountability coming for individuals who had extensive ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And again, that accountability does not include anyone in Donald Trump's cabinet or White House. We'll play for you what Joe Rogan had to say about that. Plus, from Fulton County, Georgia, now to Maricopa County, Arizona, Kristi Noem is spreading lies far and wide today about our election system, sending a chill among democracy watchers and protectors about the integrity of the upcoming midterms. And later in the broadcast, despite a drawdown of ICE agents in the state of Minnesota, there's still an alarming number of children detained as a result of Donald Trump's mass deportation policy.
I wanted to alert the public that agents are at my door right now. This is all stemming from the fact that I filmed a protest as a member of the media. It's hard to understand how we have a constitution, constitutional rights, when you can just be arrested for being a member of the press. We've seen all these violations. All right, you guys, I gotta go. They're knocking.
Yep, she's coming right now.
For folks who have been informing us about the specific ways that we're sliding into autocracy, I think it was hard before Trump returned to the White House to really imagine what that looks like and sounds like and feels like. But that video, if there's ever a museum to chronicle the heroes who stood up in this moment,